is there a difference between healthy and unhealthy stress?
There is definitely a difference.
This generation, Gen Z specifically, the level of stress is almost doubled what the greatest generation was. So there's a lot of people listening that would be like, they're all snowflakes. Is that the case?
It's definitely a different cultural landscape. There's no way that does not affect you psychologically.
All of the clinical websites have very similar things on dealing with stress. And ironically, they are all quite simple, quite effective, quite doable, and all pretty much prescribed by God in the Bible. Are you and your family stressed? Well, surveys and studies show that probably more than you even realize. This generation of young people and adults, studies are showing that they're more stressed than any other generation before them. And today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, what's the difference between healthy stress that we should lean into and unhealthy stress that we should avoid. We're also going to talk about coping mechanisms and what God has to say and how he can guide us through. And that's all the stuff we're going to be talking about here on the Live Change podcast. And I'm joined by Joanna and Jason.
Welcome back. Chad. Hey, you sound congested. You sound... Yes. Are you feeling all right?
I got a cold, and it just lingered.
Everybody's
and I got Joanna's cold.
So sorry. Oh, really? You gave it to her?
She had a cold. She had a cold, and I got it. I don't actually think she gave it to me because,
Well, maybe.
Probably did. Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I still feel have that lingering cough thing. So we're going to work around it today. I was literally talking to Chad last week, or I guess it was the week before even, and he was literally taking steps backwards.
From you?
And it's I see you moving away from me.
Well, to be fair, her voice was 3 octaves lower than it should have been.
And then it was gone.
Chad.
Oh, it was.
Chad, we need to talk about the podcast.
Oh, it totally was.
Then it was all the way gone.
Yeah, and then it was just
You want to hear something funny? Whenever I get nasal stuff, and congestion, my voice gets real low, I will go and sing I'll get my guitar and I'll do all Johnny Cash songs because it's the only time I can kind of sing. You're
that's the one thing I look forward to.
I actually look forward to it.
So
yes.
So if I walk past your house and I hear "Walk the Line,"
that's
poor
me.
Jason, he's got a cold.
He's not feeling well,
good.
but he's feeling great.
Oh my gosh!
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I've never told him about that.
Folsom
I don't even
prison.
think Jenny knows that. It's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, you learned it here
let's
first.
definitely keep it in. Let's keep it in the episode.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Let's not share that.
So today we're talking about stress. Now, today, when we talk about stress can be a little bit confusing on how you define it. So how would we define what stress is? Because I think there's a difference between stress, there's a difference between anxiety, there's a difference between pressure. So let's just talk about what we're talking about. Let's define it.
I think for me personally, what I visualize is those old school cartoons where the mom is all frizzled out and just her hair's standing on end. She looks like she hasn't changed her shirt in 3 days. That's when I feel that way on the inside. I know oof.
Yes.
What is that?
We are stressed.
Chaotic, out of order or something?
Yeah, or just you feel extra spent. You feel everything's just shooting out of you, and you don't really have anything else to
frazzled. Frazzled. And tension.
Totally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We were talking before we started recording, and you were saying, I think we were actually looking at some of the true definitions, maybe clinical definitions or whatever.
You don't think my definition is real?
No, I think it's real.
I'm just kidding.
But there were a couple of things you said, Chad, that I kind of held on to. Is that's a good sort of idea. And one of the things you talked about was it's the state of worry or mental tension, which I like that idea of state, because that means you're kind of perpetually living in it for a couple of days or whatever. It's not just a one time, I got a big test coming up and anybody's going to feel, but 7 weeks of that feeling is I'm in a season of it now. I'm in a state of it.
I think you just hit an important distinction, and I think that's our first question is there a difference between healthy and unhealthy stress? Because
so to me, there is healthy stress and there's unhealthy. I mean, there is definitely a difference. The other analogy maybe is working out, and it's almost like a spectrum. You can do nothing for your body, so you don't put stress on your body, but your muscles will atrophy.
Yeah.
You can work out so much, but so much that you tear your muscles. That's the spectrum between torn and atrophy. Somewhere in between there is like the healthy, you're still moving, you're still working your body. So when I think about stress, I think stress, I don't know how you could ever not have stress in your life if you're in relationships, working a job, like doing the things that make you human.
Okay.
So and I actually think it, again, can lead you to good things if you allow it. So
I like that. So you're basically saying is like, sometimes stress gets a bad rap. And we
Yes.
can acknowledge that. So I wrote down here, stress that's short term and it helps us with productivity. You're saying that sometimes maybe people don't have enough stress in their life.
I think sometimes they don't have enough stress in their life. And in a spirit of, here's what stress can do if you let it. It can build the character trait of resilience. That's how resilience is built. Resilience is built through managing and navigating and overcoming stressors. So, and that can be big ones or small ones, but that is how resilience, the character trait of resilience, ultimately is built. So you can get rid of everything in your life that creates stress. I don't know how you could, but let's just imagine you could. And it not serve you well. So there's a lot of good things on the other side of stress.
Yeah, and I think with the, like you said, bad rap that it gets, then I think it makes people afraid to engage it on any level. And so then I actually think you're left with like people in the scenario that you just like tried to imagine, where it's just like, well, then I'm not even going to wade into that thing because I'm afraid of the stress that it might cause. But you never get to, like what you said, like on the other side of that, if you also just don't engage it or at all costs try to avoid it.
Okay. I think I started telling you guys this story about, I started coaching boys soccer team. I started to tell you guys about this. Did I tell you, like, when did I tell you how I actually signed up to coach?
Well, Steph told you to, right?
Yeah. Well, this is how it went down. So we get an email because we signed our son Parker up for boys soccer. And we're like, great, he's going to sign up for the rec soccer team. It's going to be wonderful. But we get this email that's like, hey, by the way, we don't have a coach for your team. And it's like, oh, that's kind of unfortunate and kind of important. And they were like, we need a coach. And Steph emails me, and says, Chad, you should coach his team. And I'm like,
what we used to call Steph was the puppet master, because that was her nickname for a while, because she has this unique ability to get other people to do the things she wants them to do.
She is the Pied Piper.
Yes.
So she starts playing her pipe.
Yep.
Yeah. So she says, Chad, you should totally, you should do this, help the team and coach. And I was like, Steph, I don't know anything about soccer. I've never played soccer. I have never watched soccer. I think I know the ball is black and white. That's all I know.
Which is not anymore.
About soccer. And she was like, but you're good with people, you're good with parents, you're good with kids. Like
she came back. She came back at you.
Yeah. And I was like, and she believed in me.
I was like, I am good with people.
I was like, oh my gosh. But I was like super stressed about it. Like I was like, this is going to be a stressful thing for me.
Yeah.
And she's like, you can do it. And I'm like, okay, I signed up. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I sign up and I fill out all the paperwork. And then I get home that night and I go to Parker. I go, buddy, guess who's going to be your soccer coach? And Steph from the other room goes, who? And I go, me. And she goes, you can't coach.
No.
I was like, Steph, what did you think? She was like, I thought we were signing up to like volunteer.
Oh
I was
my
like,
gosh.
She was like, you don't know anything about soccer. I was like, I know.
You're like, I've already freaked out about this, Steph. Get on board.
Yeah. So all that to say, I ended up having an amazing time. It was super stressful sometimes because I had to learn on the go, and I had to learn from parents and other, coaches, and it was a super stressful time for me. It was not easy.
Yeah.
It was also amazing.
Yeah.
Did you learn from the parents as they were screaming from the sidelines at you?
I got to tell you, I had the best
You could do a lot
parents.
of learning that way.
I had the best parents in the world. They were so good to me. But ultimately, if I had said, like, I just don't want stress, I never would have done it. But it was such a rewarding season for me.
I'm reading a book right now called Leadership Pain by Sam Chand. And this is his whole thesis. I mean, this is really the thesis of the book, is that all growth at the end of the day, any growth we experience in personal life, leadership life, anything, it's almost always on the other side of a pain we dread going into. But but here's the thing. So the appropriate amount of stress you want is where you're always right up against your limits, or even bouncing up over it a little bit. That's stretching. That's how you build new muscles. It's when you constantly live there and you're stretching too far that you tear a muscle. So again, I just think that's the physical thing's probably a helpful metaphor in some ways.
And using that, we have some bad trainers out there, some bad metaphorical trainers.
Yeah.
We have some trainers that say you should live beyond your limit and, more stress, more stress, more stress.
Yeah.
And then we have some that's like, if, no stress, you shouldn't have any stress in your life.
Yeah.
Both of those are wrong.
Both. That's atrophy versus torn muscles.
Exhaustion.
Yeah, exactly.
Atrophy versus exhaustion. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. So all of this is in the discussion of us as adults, but we have a lot of young listeners, young adults, college-age students, and 20-somethings, and young people more than any other generation. And I've looked at the studies. The studies are staggering. This generation, Gen Z specifically, the level of stress is almost doubled what the greatest generation was, and it's 25% higher than Gen X was, and it's all generations keep getting more stress, but this one is by far the peak. And so there's a lot of people listening that would be like, yeah, they're all snowflakes. It's like they should just toughen up. But my question is that the case? Like, is this just the most tender generation? Or is this generation been exposed to things that do elicit this level of stress?
I think some of it is the amount and length of exposure to whatever the thing is that causes the stress. And so, I think we live in a day and age where we have no shortage of things to be exposed to. And so, we've even talked about boundaries in other episodes. Like, when you don't have great boundaries, you also let more flood in, which then gives you more opportunity, I think, to invite stress into the picture in non-positive ways. So, I think, again, we've been talking a lot about, what are things that we've been the cause of, or that we've been going and, trying to gain new muscle in. And then if you add on top of that, just all of the other things we can be exposed to, whether it's watching a ton of the news and then thinking about all of the stress of those what ifs, or rabbit holing on WebMD around all the things that could be wrong with you that might not be. I think we just have more exposure to more access to stressors.
So exposure, I totally agree.
I do think, and so that is definitely a cultural phenomenon with the social, with the accessibility, obviously through social media and mobile devices everywhere we go now and all that. That is different. That is different from, a generation now that's grown up that is native to them, So it never stops. I've heard one person kind of likened it this way: when we were growing up, or when I was growing up, I should say, the bullying stopped at the bus, or at the let's just say the door leaving the school. There's no stop to it now, because you go home, you can't get away from the bully, because now they're on social saying stuff about your texting, whatever it might be. So it's definitely a different cultural landscape. And I think you're right. There's not much reprieve if you don't choose.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be much more intentional now. I didn't have to, we talked about this off air a little bit ago, but I never once did a training or a school, an active shooter drill in my school. I never once that thought never crossed my mind. My kids don't know anything different. That has to affect you. There's no way that does not affect you psychologically.
You also have this generation where they're being told that financially they're going to be worse off than their parents. They're being told that in high school. You have this generation where they're actively seeing things online and constantly comparing themselves and their behaviors, their looks, their performances to everyone else in the world, not just their classroom.
Yeah.
But everyone, and they can't escape that. And and we live in a photoshopped world where everyone has a filter on their face, so they're comparing themselves to everyone's best example. And then there's also academic performances where it's like There's more testing, more counseling, more clinics, more camps, more everything that you can do to become the best. And I do think that we are guilty to some level, we as parents of this generation, because we've told our kids that the only thing stopping them from being the next, insert the name, is work, determination, and grit. And the expectation is high.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, I think, with the parenting thing, because then it's like also like I want to protect my kids and do everything I can. And so I feel like at times I'm either putting more stress on them or I'm taking on more stress as a result of that. And so then I also think then there's that dynamic at play when you're caring for kids, then it's a whole different kind of tension that you're trying to either protect from or take on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting that in the middle of all of that stuff increasing, you've also got busier schedules than ever before. I'm speaking sort of anecdotally on that one, but I'm pretty confident we could go and we could find research to back that up, that there are more activities for children and for families today than ever before. There's more expectations placed on I can't tell you how many friends I have that their weekends are done because of sports.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything that's bad. I'm just trying to say it's interesting that as one has increased, so has the other. That could just be a national coping mechanism or a cultural coping mechanism.
Wow.
Technology is another mind, kind of numbing out. All these ways are just ways of trying to.
Wow.
Individually we do them, but I'm just trying to say maybe it's cultural as well.
I think we also have to just constantly check our motives as parents. I think we have to always check our motives and go, why do they need to be in this sport? Why do they need to do this? Why do they need to be in this chorus? Why do they need to play this instrument? Why is it for them? Do they want to? Have they elected to do that? I think we have to have the tough conversations just internally if we're trying to create and influence the perfection of our child through offering them things to do, which is not actually leading to the perfection of your child. Mm-hmm. It's leading to the fact that your child will have learned to do lots of things, but it does not mean your child will be a good person. It does not guarantee them success. It just means they will have had a very busy schedule. And I think we as parents have to gut check that. And then we also have to gut check our comparison to even my daughter and my son have very different grades. They're very different academically. We cheer one thing on for Parker that we would cheer very differently for Olivia. And I think we as parents need to figure out what is our children's best and not expect everyone's children's best, but our children's best. That's for me. That's where I'm getting at.
Yeah, I like that.
What are the flashing yellow lights for when it comes to stress? So like we all know that, we have stressful seasons and everything like that, but just so if someone's listening and they're like, I'm not sure if this affects me or if this is about me, what's a yellow light that's flashing that you would go like, I need to pay attention?
One of the stories that I thought about as we were thinking about this topic and all that is in Luke chapter 10, and it's the story of Martha and Mary. And I actually pulled it up because I want to read a couple of parts of it. So the context is Jesus is about to visit their home. They're getting a meal ready for Jesus. They want to welcome him. Martha and Mary are sisters, by the way. And this is what it says: as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet. So she's very at peace. She's sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. Martha, here's an important word, was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came out to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset and stressed over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it's not going to be taken away from her. The interesting sort of, you've obviously got someone who's stressed, who's allowed their stress to, cloud their vision of what's most important. But there are also some interesting little warning signs on this. Number one is relational strife. So she's got to, like, might be a warning sign. Like if there's relational strife between you and your close friends, because like, just pay attention to that kind of stuff, because that might be a sign that there's stressors popping up. Another sort of indicator light is for Martha here's irritability. It's kind of under the surface here. And I know that's definitely one for me. When I feel most stressed, people are problems now. They're not people to be loved and served. And so if you interrupt me, you're getting in the way of me getting my objective done for the day or whatever it might be. So that can be an indicator light. And then this one's maybe not so much in the story, but there's a level of what's the word? Just shutting down at some point.
Yeah.
And I think that one's common, where it just feels so overwhelming that you're just like, forget it, I'm done. And that might be Martha at that point. She's like, I'm done making this meal. I just tell her to, like, I'm done now. So I think those are some yellow lights to consider, related to stress as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said like the I'm done. I think that's also where like the numbing comes in, where it's like, then I'm going to watch Netflix, or I'm going to scroll, or I'm going to watch the Office episode that I've seen 100 times, 100 more times. Because then you're just like, you almost get that like paralysis where it's like, well, now I'm so stressed, I don't even want to deal with the stress.
Which makes you more stressed.
Or you just check out of it and you're like, well, this is just going to resolve itself.
Wow.
Like,
and you're
it's
saying,
not gonna.
but that takes a lot of self-awareness to know, am I doing this because I just want leisure, which is not a bad thing, or am I avoiding something?
Totally.
And that's the difference.
Yep.
Because the stress is usually like, there's a pain, like we talked about earlier, I need to kind of go into right now. And that just might mean the discipline, like the pain might be, I need to study for an hour and like, I don't want to do it. So that's, when we say pain, it doesn't have to be like some big traumatic thing.
Totally.
It could just be a conversation you're avoiding with your spouse or with your friend. Anyways, if it's like, I can't even think about that, I'm just going to do this to avoid it.
Yes,
that's the issue. I think that's the issue. That's the shutting down thing.
When I'm in seasons of stress where it's getting unhealthy, I'm just not. And what that also means is I'm not available to God.
Yeah.
I'm not available for the still small voice to say, like, go talk to that person, or, give that person, a bigger tip, or, go across to the neighbor, or like, I'm just not. I'm distracted. It's like you said with Martha, and I've never heard it said like that, is I get that.
Yep.
Because I'm distracted, and I'm distracted from being a positive to my kids in the way I want to be. Yep. And it's like, yeah, we can play Phase 10 tonight. No, I'm like, no, I'm stressed right now. But I still am going to go watch Netflix. You know what I mean? Like,
that's the irony. Is like you feel I can't take another thing on, but you're not doing anything productive.
Yeah.
No.
So
and that's where I feel like it's
time.
crossed the line for me, when I can't compartmentalize it. Like there's a difference too of like, I can be stressed at work, but then go home and leave it there. Or have I brought it home with me and now it's continuing to consume?
Totally.
Like that's also where like I know it's crossed a line where it's like, okay, now that like needs to be checked, because now like you're not leaving the tension of what you were dealing with in one place. You're actually like carrying it over into the other place. And that's like always a recipe for disaster.
So let's talk about what God's coping mechanisms are. Because like here's the irony, is God's coping mechanisms and society's coping mechanisms for stress are hysterically adjacent, or they're incredibly identical.
You're saying the biblical principles line up with.
So I read a lot of very, very clinical websites about stress in my preparation for this episode, and all of the clinical websites have very similar things on dealing with stress. The epidemic of stress. They all have the similar things that you're supposed to do. And ironically, they are all quite simple, quite effective, quite doable, and all pretty much prescribed by God in the Bible. And it's fascinating. So here's a couple that I thought I'd read, a couple coping mechanisms that One was lower your expectations, ask others to help you, take responsibility for the situation that you're in. I thought that was good. Maintain emotionally supportive relationships, so do not live life alone. Maintain emotional composure, distance yourself from the source of your stress. Sometimes we can't do that. But here's my favorite. Are you ready for this, guys? This came from the Cleveland Clinic. View the problem through a religious perspective. Here is this medical organization that they're like, have you thought about going to church? And I'm like, really? Isn't that interesting? With all your knowledge, you have to acknowledge that one of the best things you can do is look at this situation through your faith. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was interesting. And then there's always the eat, sleep, and exercise well, take vacations, rest, practice relaxation, all of these kind of things. And it even said avoid caffeine and alcohol because it's a coping mechanism kind of thing. So, so what do you think? What are some things that God talks about in the Bible that kind of align with what we see from some of these, findings?
I mean, the number one thing I think of right away is Sabbath and the idea of resting. And, that is established. Actually, a lot of people think it's established in the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. It's not, though. It's actually established in Genesis 1, the very first chapter of the entire Bible. And so God creates, and after God creates, it says God rested, which is actually, this is kind of interesting. There's other creation accounts, legends and myths from Egypt, Babylonia, all these different places. What's interesting is in all these other creation accounts, it always ends with the God creating a temple where you can come and meet that God, usually on a hill. The difference, one of the differentiating marks of this creation story, of the Christian creation story, is that this God says on the culminating final act of creation, the last thing he creates is rest on day 7. So what he's saying is, you don't find me in a place, you'll find me in time with me. You'll find me, you don't have to go anywhere. I'm already here. You'll find me when you break and you finally pay attention. And then it gets carried through into Exodus 20, where the Hebrew people are been enslaved for 400 years, and they're coming out of slavery. And God says, here's the 10 things. I'm going to make it real easy. Don't kill each other. Don't cheat on each other if you're married. But one of them is take a break. You have to take it's called the Sabbath in the Old Testament. And that's one full day of not doing work. It doesn't mean being lazy, sitting around. It just means not doing the work that you had been doing. Because why? He wants them to remember you're not slaves anymore. So your value and who you are is not determined by what you do. So he forces that in a sense. So all that to say, that's embedded into the spiritual life of God wants us to rest and break so that stress, we're not always constantly living above our limits. The load isn't above our limits.
See, this is interesting because it didn't stop in the Old Testament. Jesus illustrated this.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus rested. And Jesus had a very finite amount of time to do earthly ministry. And he still found time to go off and spend time in prayer and spend time in the Word and spend time, praying to God. And that's another one that, is constantly meditation, relaxation, breathing. Is there something tied with that to our physical and stress health? Is that time with God?
Well, yes, because we're integrated beings. You can't separate our physical, relational, spiritual, emotional. It's all one. So it is all tied together. I can't just go work out my body physically and be healthy if all my relationships are not in order. If they're toxic, that will affect me, is my point, because we're integrated people. So, and everything is tied back to the spiritual. So, yeah, I think they're intimately tied together.
And I think that's why so often you hear folks, and I know it's true for me, when one of those pieces is not working, other ones will eventually start to not work too.
Yes.
And so it doesn't typically, even matter which one starts first, but they typically are all ebbing and flowing
That makes
in similar direction.
So what are your warning signs when you know one of those is not working?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. I'm very feeling based, I guess.
I like
so
that.
like it's just like, I feel off. Why am I feeling off? So then it could be, hey, I skipped a couple of days of working out, or I ate a couple of days like really terrible in a row, or hey, I haven't prayed in a couple of days, haven't invited God into like what I'm experiencing. And so then usually other things follow. So then whether it's I'm shorter tempered with Kevin or the kids, it's like, okay, well then that's like another check, so I think it's like, just seeing when something is off, just pausing and recognizing. I have a tendency to just try to want to push through it. And like that just never ends well, because then you're just kind of heaping more on. And even some of the warning signs you talked about, like you just start seeing more of them pop up, and you can either pause and evaluate or push through and create more havoc.
The Sabbath thing is one of the things for me is when I start feeling like I do not have enough time to get everything I need to get done, but I'm not being productive with my time.
Yeah.
It's like a big, like, oh, something's going on. Something's going on in me. It's the constant feeling I'm behind, and yet I'm not maximizing my time, and you're doing the stupid stuff. So you're not even, you're perpetually, it's the self, I don't know if it's like a self-sabotage thing, but you're certainly not helping yourself.
Totally.
I for years and years, just 6 months, well, I don't know when it was. It was back in the summer at some point. One of my goals this year was it was easy for me. It's always been easy for me to take a day off when I'm not speaking on a weekend. That's easy. But anytime I'm speaking on a weekend, I've never figured out how to get a day off. And which, there's a problem with that several different ways. But I mean, but there's a big problem this last year because my speaking amount of times I was speaking went way, way, way up. So you can kind of survive 10, 11 times a year. I'm not saying that's even good. I'm just saying like you just tell yourself, oh, whatever. But then when it's the majority of weekends, it was like, I got to figure this out. So anyways, I talked to a bunch of people who kind of a few steps ahead of me on some of this and just asked. And see, we have Saturday night gatherings. And so Saturday, you're working all day. But I finally just, I finally just figured it out. I was like, I'm taking Friday off. And honestly, it was a way, have we talked about this?
Mm-mm.
Okay. It was a way, I would not have done it unless I felt convicted in a sense that God was saying, you don't trust me with your time. Like you trust me in these areas. You don't trust me with your time. And because of that, you've taken it on you think it's all up to you. And so it was a total act of a response of like, I'm going to trust you with my time. I will not work on anything related to the church on Friday. And that has been really hard. And I'm telling you, it has made Saturdays so much better and enjoyable and fresh. And the first time I ever did it, by the way, it was Thursday. And I was like, because now I got to do everything that I would have done on Friday by 5 p.m., let's say, that's got to be done Thursday night now. And I was doing all my stuff on Thursday, and I was cranking. I was like, it's done. And the computer shut down, and I lost everything. First time I had ever said, I'm doing it.
Oh, I think we all felt stress when you said that.
I had a lot of words with Jesus. We went on a long walk through a cornfield, and but then I was like, you know what? Because there was a part of me, I was like, fine, I'll work tomorrow.
Yeah.
If this is how, and then I was like, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. But Jesus, I really need you right now to give me everything that I just lost. But all that to say, that is a discipline. That is I'm not sure there's no practical, here's what I want to say. There's no practical reason to do these kinds of things. It doesn't make sense. You would think if there's more work, there's more stressors. The answer is work longer, work harder. And yet God reverses this thing and says, no, take care of yourself, or I'm going to make you lie down in green pastures. Just remember that. But take care of yourself, and I will fill in the gaps. I'm going to fill in all the gaps. And it's
Love that.
been much more peaceful. I've had more peace.
So to close this conversation, how would you? Let's start by the parents that's listening that says like, how do they manage their children's stress, and what just one or two pieces of advice, like if there's a parent listening and it says like I don't want my kid to be stressed, but at the same token I don't want them to be lazy. I want them to reach their potential. What are some advice for those parents listening?
I tell my kids all the time, cast your cares upon Jesus. I take them back to the scriptures. So that's what 1 Peter 5:7 says. Cast your worries or your anxieties, your cares, depending on what translation, cast it on Jesus. And I just try to, we talk about that a lot. Hey, right now, just cast it on. Well, I know you're worried about that. I know you're stressed about this. Let's cast it on. What does that look like? Just talk to them about it. Tell them. Throw it on them. That's what word means, to throw. Like throw it. Let's figure out, let's talk about that. So that's one of the things. And then I always have my kids write it out. Tell because sometimes what it is, it's overwhelming because it's all in your head. And you're like, I've got a million things to do. We'll say stuff like that. And it's like, okay, let's write it out. And you write it out. It's 4. All right. Now let's start going down the list. When can we do this? Well, I can do that tomorrow. And it's just a little bit more manageable. So sometimes I'll have my kids do that every now and then. It's like, it's not a million things. So let's just get it down on paper. That's one of the things I do, by the way, when I'm feeling stressed. I just write things down so I can start working. Then I feel like I have some control over it. Yeah. It's the frazzle thing going back to what you said, Joanna, earlier. That's when it feels most, I have no control over
trapped.
This. Yeah, like you're trapped and you're frustrated because you don't know. And sometimes just getting it out, it's like, oh, all right, by Saturday I can have these 3 things done.
Totally.
That's good.
Yeah, I think from a parent perspective, trying to be cognizant, am I adding stress or do I have the ability to help manage the stress? Like, because I would agree, I don't know that I want to completely remove all stress. And again, I don't mean that as even in a bad way. I just think that is life and that is going to happen. And so in the context of our home, I'd also love to teach our kids what to do with it when they're up against it. But I think being cognizant, am I adding another clinic to the schedule because I want Finn to be really good at baseball? Yeah. And so am I adding to it or am I helping manage it well?
And I think the thing I'd say is we also have to emulate what is healthy behavior. Kids are watching. So if we don't take care of ourselves and have healthy rhythm, so like Jason, if you didn't seek Sabbath and you didn't listen to God and you didn't lay down, and then you expected your kids to have healthy rhythm, they're going to be like, I didn't see you, exhibit it. So I think we have to do that too. So what are the things that we would say to the person that's, kind of, figuring out where they're at with their stress? Maybe it's the person that's, they feel frazzled. They feel like the candle has been burnt at both ends and in the center. Or maybe it's the person that, is just feeling a little overwhelmed. What would we say to that person listening?
Well, Jason, I think what you said, like so much of it is take inventory. So like name all the things. So whether the list is short or long or multifaceted, just start by naming all the things. Because then I think it's a lot, you can get to resolve a lot with a clearer path in mind because you at least know what you're up against. Like, because I would agree. Yeah. So much of it is the holding it in your brain that you just don't know how to sort through all of that. So whether that's on your own, on a piece of paper, or whether that's talking it out with someone you trust and say, hey, these are all the things I feel like I'm up against right now. I think the first step is like kind of getting it out and taking inventory.
Yeah. I mean, the things that the Cleveland Clinic was talking about, I think you're right. This is just, they're borrowing so much from biblical wisdom and what God says how to do life well. And so, where would you start? You start by diving into Christ-centered relationships and what Paul says to carry each other's burdens. So let your burdens be known and the stressors be known so that you find a safe place. The Proverbs talk about how blessed it is to have someone that when you fall, they can help you back up. But you can't do that if you haven't given yourself into those kinds of relationships. So open yourself up, talk about those kinds of things. Take a Sabbath, figure out how to get it done. And you're not going to die, and it's going to feel like you are, and it's going to feel like you'll be more behind. You'll actually be more energized on the other side of it. And then cast your cares. I think part of casting your cares onto Jesus is doing what Joanna, you just said. It's saying, here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Jesus, I need you to help me. I know that you care about these things more than even I do. And I need you to give me clarity and insight how to carry this right now. And I'm going to trust your wisdom to just kind of start working through these things one at a time. So, and then praying for courage to do the hard thing. Again, the hard thing is not a bad thing. The hard thing is usually the key to growth. And so the more you don't do it, usually the more the stress feels weighty until you finally just do it. I can't tell you how many times I've had to do something really, really hard. And then as soon as after you do it, you're like, oh, we're good. But it was the putting it off that was the making it so much worse. And so you're more, I'm telling to the audience right now, you're much more courageous than you think you are. You are stronger than you think you are. And in Jesus, you have the ability to do things because of his spirit inside of you that others would look at and go, how in the world did you do that? And you're like, because Jesus has given me the courage and the strength that I need to move forward. So, and to do those hard things. And that's how resilience is born and built.
I love that. Life is stressful and it's gonna be stressful, but God can do some really great things through that stress. And he can also help you find peace and Sabbath in the most stressful of seasons. And that's the beauty of being a life changed by Christ. And that's what this podcast is all about. So share, subscribe, make sure that other people get to listen to it. And as always, remember, you're a life changed by Christ. So live that change out.